Before I begin, a viewer attached this forum to my Reddit community, and I'm reading the trip report that was inside of that forum. The original question asked was, huffing, is it dangerous and safest substance to huff? And then they continued with, well, first off, I'd like to say that I nor my friend will be huffing anything except the oxygen around us, but I am very curious as to the health dangers and actual effects of huffing certain substances. First, is huffing something really as dangerous as they say? And what are the effects that can be achieved from this? This trip report is in response to this question. When I was 14, my cousin, who is now literally a living dead person, convinced me that what made huffing dangerous was when people ingested the chemicals, as he so ignorantly put it, and that the air was safe. He claimed everyone says huffing is bad because they do it wrong. He proceeded to fill a plastic bag with a propellant room deodorizer, and then when it was full, he dumped out the liquid which had pooled at the bottom. He claimed most people leave it in the bag or shoot the shit directly into their mouth through a shirt or rag. Then he took it all in one inhale and then exhaled after holding it. His eyes glazed over, muscles in his face twitched randomly, and then finally he started drooling on himself. He kinda came to around 10 minutes later raving about how much he just tripped balls. He claimed that he felt great, and that his method of making huffing safe by dumping out liquid and not breathing it back into the bag to keep inhaling it had kept him and his friends perfectly healthy. After my experience though, I'm sure he knew he was lying to me. Unfortunately, I was much less drug savvy at the time and assumed that my cousin knew something most people didn't know about a drug class that I knew nothing about. I tried his method. I don't know how I felt, I just know I really liked it. I remember doing it with him for the rest of the day until the can was dead empty. I remember believing that I enjoyed the effects, even though the only effect was blacking out and waking up face down in drool with a bag in your fist. I never remembered one single second of the high. The only part I was conscious for was the suicidal headache and the night of vomiting that followed. After that, you'd think that I'd want to stop. I woke up the next morning and craved it horribly. This was made worse by my cousin saying that's normal for your first time. I told him I couldn't remember anything other than the few minutes between huffs and being sick when we ran out. He claimed this was normal. My memory is so fucked that I'm not sure how many days I huffed with him for, but I do know that after the second day I didn't get sick anymore. And even when I wasn't actively huffing, I felt intoxicated like I was drunk, but I was 100 times more stupid and forgetful than alcohol could ever make a person. At some point, my cousin started talking about how the best high is inhaling gasoline fumes, but that we should only do that just once as he did not have a fake method for making it safe. Now gasoline, I do remember what that felt like. We took the small half-empty spare gas tank from the garage and unscrewed the smaller cap on the back, then inhaled through the spout. I was still in a severe stupor and wanted my cousin to think I was cool, so I was the guinea pig. I took a lungful and exhaled. What happened next was nothing like inhaling propellant. It started at the base of my spine. A very warm and intensely pleasurable sensation slowly crept up, and it felt like as it passed each vertebrae, my whole body would vibrate more and more with warmth and intensity. It felt like it took a whole lifetime to reach my head, but when it did, I felt an explosion of warmth and rushing that washed over my whole body. Once I could register sight and sound again, I have no idea how long I was out of it for. The first thing I heard was a phone's busy signal extremely loud, which then faded as I shook my head and tried to figure out where I was. I saw my cousin slumped over the gas can on the floor and remembered the orgasmic rush I had just had and promptly stumbled giggling back to the can. The next X amount of days are completely blacked out. One major problem with using gas fumes to get high is that in 2 or 3 days of huffing, we still had the same amount of gas in the tank, so it was an endlessly reusable drug with the rush that one will never want to stop chasing. After no more than a week of huffing, I was a zombie whose only function was to keep breathing air filtered through that can. I must have remembered to drink some amount of water because I'm still alive, but I think the last time I ate was the morning after my first use. My parents were out of town for all of this, and my cousin and his mom had been ignoring each other for years. When I finally was dropped off at home, my parents immediately noticed that I was really fucked up on something. I claimed to be really drunk, which they believed, and after some yelling, I was finally allowed to pass out in my own bed after telling myself that it was no big deal, and I'll just go back to smoking weed and getting drunk for kicks, and it'll be fine. At 3 a.m. that morning, I woke up to throbbing pain in my head and eyes, extreme nausea but only dry retching, and even though I felt very sober, I couldn't focus my vision, and attempting to walk resulted in so much dizziness that once I got myself laying back down, I was dry retching again. This feeling was combined with crushing depression, and cravings brought me to the point where I probably would have tried to commit suicide at the worst of it, if only I could have walked 3 feet without being immobilized by pain and nausea. I laid in bed and cried for hours, honestly hoping that I would die soon because I was convinced that's what was happening. It took 3 days before I was able to get out of bed and be able to pretend I was better from drinking myself sick my first time trying liquor, which my parents still believe. It took a month for the headaches and pain behind my eyes to go away. I was severely depressed and considered suicide every day for the next year, only getting better after I eased myself back into smoking weed and spent months in therapy. And finally, I know, not think, but know that I did permanent brain damage. Inhalants are not drugs, and they do not get you high. The pleasurable effects I experienced were my brain's panicked endorphin responses to the neurotoxins that I was exposing it to. Inhalants make you feel high by doing brain and nerve damage. Even if you huff one time, the effects are irreversible. Huffing is getting high on brain damage. My cousin and I never truly spoke again, and we never will. His mother wrote off never leaving his room as typical teenage angst and assumed he never came out when she was home because he blamed her for his father walking out a year before. I tried to talk to him a few times over the next 2 months, but he never came to the door, and his mom had to start working a second job, so he was alone all day every day. I still blame myself for not telling my aunt to take him to the hospital the day that I realized he was still using when I couldn't get him to unlock his room door to let me in. I was already horribly depressed, and I couldn't imagine how much worse his poisoning would be than mine was. I finally told my aunt that I thought he might be smoking crack, and she ended up calling 911 when she couldn't get any response whatsoever through the door. He was severely malnourished, like literally skin and bones. He was, and is, completely unable to speak or make coordinated movements. He never got better, and never will, and the hardest part for me is that my aunt blames herself. If I had just fucking told my parents the truth the night I claimed to be extremely drunk, then they would have freaked out appropriately, and my cousin might still have a life. I ruined my aunt's life also. Her son requires full-time care the way an infant would, only he never smiles, never laughs, and never cries. He just stares blankly. The part that truly makes me physically sick is that she is so grateful to me for my selfish lying. She thinks I saved her only son's life when the truth is that I could have saved him, but I was too much of a coward. That was 8 years ago, and I still have horrible nightmares. I feel like his soul will haunt me my whole life. I've used a lot of actual drugs over those 8 years, and none of them are anything like huffing. Take it from me, as I have done both, you would be doing much less harm to yourself smoking crystal meth all day long than taking one single huff. It took me 3 hours to write this, and I did not do it for my own health. There is no such thing as a safest inhalant. They all create euphoric effects as a result of destroying the brain. I have to live with this horrible lie for the rest of my life. I am a grown man, and I will break down into tears when I remember how I felt after being poisoned like that, and I imagine my cousin living in that hell or possibly something even more torturous. He was unable to speak or even go to the bathroom on his own. A prisoner inside his own mind, doomed to spend every second of his life he still has, praying for death. Wow, that was probably one of the most fucked up stories I've read on this channel. Please, don't do inhalants. They're so bad for you. If you haven't learned from this story or the other stories I have on my channel, nothing good comes from it. And like this guy said, even one huff can ruin your life. When it's safer to smoke meth, you know you have to avoid this shit. Also, I had to copy and paste the story into my own Google Drive document. The grammar and the structure of the sentences were so bad I had to fix it. It took me about 10 minutes just to fix it. He never capitalized an I except at the beginning of a paragraph, and he spelled a lot of things very wrong. So for some reason, if the story wasn't enough to make you avoid inhalants, maybe the way he wrote his story will. But if you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe if you're new. And also subscribe to my second channel where I'll be posting some random shit all the time. I just uploaded a video on my phenibut use. I was going to do that on this channel, but I figured I wanted to go off the cuff with it, so I figured I would upload it to that second channel. Anyways, thank you all for your support, and have a wonderful day.